Alright guys, it's time to get into the good stuff. So now we are going to explore our toolbar, and I'm going to show you what the buttons over here on the left do, and which ones you'll be using and which ones you can kind of just forget about to make it easier. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open or create a new document. So I'm going to do new blank file, and I'm going to do an 8x8 just because I just want a good square canvas to work with. I'm going to leave all of this as normal. So I've got my 300 dpi or resolution pixels per inch. I have my RGB color. I have white as my background. Clicking OK. So here is my document. Now I've gone ahead and I've opened a piece of clip art that I've purchased, and I'm going to drag that and just plop it right there on that document. And I'm going to actually put my document, I'm going to dock it, which you can either have it undocked where it floats around and it's free, or you can just hover right here until it turns blue and click and commit it to your docking bar. So now I'm going to go ahead real quick and resize this, just so it fits on here. And I'm going to tell it OK, and I'm going to do a little bit of finagling so that it looks like a banner in the top corner. Okay, and I'll show you how to do all that. Just bear with me. Okay, so let's start right here. This is your zoom tool. If you do not have a scroll wheel, which I am doing right now, I'm zooming in and zooming out with my mouse, then this is the tool that you will use. You can use it in one of two ways. You can either click, and you can see right there it's making it smaller because there is a negative sign on my looking glass. If I click here, now it's a positive sign, which means it's going to make it bigger, and I can click up and it makes it bigger. Now I did just zoom with scroll wheel because that's what I typically do, but this is bigger, and you can right click and get the zoom out option and right click and zoom out. If you wanted to just zoom out one or two, that's an easy way to do it. Or you can click here and that will preset it as zoom out, and then you would right click to zoom in. See how that works? So let me zoom it back in, and let's go to the next one. So the hand tool is only used in conjunction with your zoom tool. And what the hand tool does is it drags your scroll bars without having to come over here and drag them. So this way you can do it over, across. It just moves your canvas. So let me zoom with my scroll wheel, and then I zoomed in so far I can't see. I need that detail, but it was off of my screen, so I just drag it right there on. And while we're here, I'm going to show you something else. We're going to zoom way in. Do you remember when we talked about raster files versus vectors? Can you see how when I zoom way in on this raster file, how I can see the little squares, the pixels? Now if it was a vector, it would not be that way, but when you zoom out, you can't tell. So you don't lose any resolution by making it smaller. You only lose resolution when you're making it bigger. Okay? Now let's move to this one. This is the move tool. This is where you're going to grab whatever you need. Like, say we click off of that. If I do this, it's not moving anything. But if I click here, I now have this layer and I can move it. So that's your move tool. And this right here is your marquee tool. We are not going to discuss that right now. We are going to actually do a whole separate video on how to use your marquee tool. But just know that it's there. And any time that there are little arrows in the corner when you hover over one of your tool options, that means that they have multiple options. So if I clicked on marquee tool, let me click off of it and click back on it. You can see down here I can do a rectangular marquee, or I can do an elliptical marquee. If I click back to the move tool, I don't have any options but since this one has the little arrow, it has options. Now this is our lasso. It also has options, so let's click on it. And there are 3 different options. You have a lasso, you have a lasso, a magnetic lasso, and a polygonal lasso. I probably said that wrong, but forgive me. That's not a word I use most of the time. And honestly, this isn't a tool that I use a whole lot, but we will discuss it. Okay, so then this one is the magic wand, which is super fantastic. I mean, it's got lots of options down here. So you have a quick selection, you have a selection brush, you have the magic wand, you have the refined selection brush, and then you have an auto selection. So we will get into magic wands and what we're going to do with those a little bit later. Now we're moving on to the enhance options on our toolbar. These are mostly going to be used with photo editing. So we are not going to do much with these. In fact, I don't know that I use them for anything, but you can still use them in different ways. Like let's say you have a photo that you bring on to an invitation if someone wanted their child's picture, or you were putting a picture of your office staff on a flyer. You could use the red eye tool, which has an autocorrect. You could use the spot healing brush. You could use the smart brush. This is a clone stamp, so I could pick a spot and I could clone it, and I could basically stamp it all over if I wanted to. This right here is the blur, and here's your sponge. So I don't use these very often, but you may find a need for them when you start creating your graphic. So the next area that we go to is the draw icons, and we are going to use these a ton. And so most of these are going to have their own video for you to watch, but I want to give you just a quick overview real quick. We've got the brush tool, which there are several brushes that you can use, which are so fun. We will get into these later. I don't know if you can see all these fun like splatter paints and different brushes. Those are the default brushes. We also have impressionist brushes and color replacement brushes. Here is our eraser tool. Yours was probably on this way, and it has 3 options. You have just the eraser, which we just erase. You just erase. You can change the size like this and make it small. I don't want mine to stay that way, so I am going to use my undo button until I get it back to where I was. So there we go. Then we also have a background eraser, and we have a magic eraser, which I'm a huge fan of the magic eraser. I'm going to show you real quick. If you were to decide that you wanted this to be a transparent background instead of a white background, at this point you could use the magic eraser and click on that layer and just click it anywhere, and it erases every bit of that. Or let me undo, or you could just click this layer off. But that is a really cool tool to just erase a whole bunch at one time. Now, our paint bucket tool, this one right here, you can grab any color you want. You could pick a color from off of your current clip art or your canvas. And then you could just dump it. So let's dump it on this background layer. Look at that. Now, it looks like some things disappeared, but that's only because we made them the same color as the flags were. So let's undo. There we go. Now this is our gradient tool. We'll go into that later on. This is our color picker tool. It also looks like an eyedropper. This is where you will actually pick your color. See, if I click in here, or I can click over here, and it's changing. This is the new, this is the current. Okay, so the next tool that we have to work with is our shape selection tool. If you'll click down here, there are 7 different options. We have a custom shape, We have a rectangle tool shape. We have a rounded rectangle which just rounds the edges. We have an ellipse tool. We have a polygon shape. We have a star. And we have a line tool. The next one over here is the text tool. You'll see it also has the triangle, so it has lots of options. You have just your regular horizontal text. You have your vertical. And then you have different masks and shapes that you can actually do your text with. So we will do a whole video on just how to use all of these different options, but there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with text. This is your pencil. You would just draw. I don't use this very often because I don't have a steady hand, but that's all we do. Click undo. Then down here in the modify block, you have a crop tool, which you can see right here. It has no restrictions, or we could tell it what sizes we wanted it, or we could type it in right here. Here we have a cookie cutter. And lastly, we have a perspective crop. I don't really use that much, but I do use these two. So we will talk about those in a future video. This right here is the recompose tool. Right here we have the content aware move options, which I do not normally use. And then this one right here is a straighten tool. So this would help to, if you brought in an image that was sitting on its side or at an angle, you could pick something to straighten it to. With graphics, I don't normally use this, but you may find a need for it. Then last is our color, and we've kind of gone over that when we picked the color picker tool, but this shows your foreground color, and here shows your background color. Let's see if I can click on. Let's see. There we go. Now I've got my background, so you have to click off of it to set the other. So now watch. So now I have my foreground color is brown. My background color is red. I don't normally change my background color, but you may find a need to. I'm going to switch these back because I'm going to want that to be white for any future videos. Okay, so that is our toolbar. Just a quick explanation, and then we are going to move on and talk about some of those in more detail in future videos.